Welcome back, everyone, to Jface Games. Today we're finishing off the TTRPG equation, which I started 5 videos ago. We did 4 videos talking about how shared storytelling is a component of TTRPG, and now we started the games and toys portion of this, finishing off this equation that TTRPGs are a combination of shared storytelling, games, and toys. And so we really started getting into game design last video, and we talked about 3 components of game design: goals, emotions, and controls. And today we are talking about toys and flow state. And this will probably be a quick video. So, what are toys within a game? And I think this is an important one because a lot of people immediately think of, when they think of toys, they think of physical toys, but it doesn't have to be. So toys are the things that when we play with toys, but we play games. So the game is the big thing that we are playing within, and the toys are the things we're playing within that game, right? So baseball is a game. The baseball, the bat, the glove, those are toys. Key to toys is they actually have some playful exploration within them. What does it do? How does it work? When does it break? How do I use this? Right? These are aspects that make toys fun to kind of explore within. That's why Legos are going to be around for hundreds of years in terms of a toy, because they're wonderful to play with. Like you're just exploring with, what can I do with these things? Toys are open-ended tools that spark imagination, inspire to create and produce your own stories, inventions, recipes, etc. Games are inherently defined, right? So the game is designed. And the toy can be either physical or mechanical. And this is more TTRPG, meaning that you can have a mechanic that the players get to play around with that is technically a toy, right? I think resource management, for instance, is an example of toys, right? How am I going to use these resources? It's a very simplistic manner of a toy, but it's technically a toy. When you have that resource that you're trying to use to fuel multiple different things and you're trying to balance it out, it's kind of a toy that you're playing within it. Okay. All right, so same idea. Toys will add the complexity and ability to explore or on top of the more basic game mechanics. Now, what I'm going to show here is a failed design. All right, what I mean by it's a failed design, meaning that sometimes I'm jogging, and when I jog, I've got my iPhone and my iWatch going, and I'll just dictate something like, I use my jogging and I'll come up with an idea and I'll be like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And I talk like I'm Dick Tracy into my watch, and that then gets transcribed for me, and sometimes it doesn't make any damn sense because the talk to type isn't always the best. But this was an idea that I had come up with after thinking about the concept of toys and play, right? This isn't a perfect idea, and I'm not using it in my current game, so if you want to use it, go for it. Enjoy yourself. But this was a thought. So the thought being that you had 4 resources: body, quickness, mind, spirit, whatever. 4 attributes, 4 pools of resources, right? Whatever your stat is for that resource, or for whatever your stat is for that actually is also how many sort of like number of resources you have available, right? So start of the session or encounter, the attribute number is also the number of resources you have, okay? Now, different powers you have at your ability, or different abilities, would then generate these resources for your party, right? And this kind of, I think this dovetailed off the idea that Daggerheart has. I think it's Daggerheart, the new Daggerheart's coming out, where in that game there was a resource where if you spent it on yourself, you got like a +1, but if you used it for an ally, it gave them like a +2 or something like that. Something to that effect. And I thought about that and I was like, that's kind of cool. And what that made me think of is that, what if you had powers? What if that was the whole game, right? What if you had these powers that when you used them, you would then gain a resource, but your ally would gain 2 resources of the same thing, right? So it might say either either you gain 1 resource or your ally gains 2 resources, whatever. So then what I started thinking about is you make each subclass or whatever sort of reliant more on a different resource as a primary. And so for me, I was thinking about my system. So you have warrior, and the tactician uses all four to some degree because they are kind of balanced. The fury uses a lot of body and maybe spirit. The seeker uses a lot of quickness and mind, maybe, etc. Right? And then what happens is that you have access to the first ability in each of these trees. I talked about this the other day, but you don't know them fully. And now we have this sort of element of testing them out and seeing if you can learn them and if you can figure out the ability. We talked about that last time. But what I really liked about this idea was this idea that now everyone in the party is relying on these four resources. And when I use an ability, I get a resource, and it doesn't have to be or, but I get a resource, but it also generates a different type of resource for someone else potentially. And so this starts to get into that idea of, now this is very video gamey, I get, because it gets in the idea of, oh, my party needs to use more, like my so-and-so needs to use a spirit ability. I've got these three abilities that I can use. One of them can generate spirit for an ally, so I'm going to go ahead and use that one. Maybe one of them uses, like, one of them generates something for anybody or whatever. Like, the idea being that now you have these tactical decisions and these ideas coming from, when do I want to use this ability because I'm running out of this resource and I need more of that resource, and my ally needs this resource, and it becomes this very resource generation game. That could be an example of a toy, right? Where it's like you're playing with these resource pools that are somewhat shared in a way. Not shared, but you're sending allies resources. However, for my game, I don't know currently if it felt intuitive and seamless, right? Which is, I'm going for trimmed down and streamlined. So when I was doing this and kind of brainstorming this and having fun thinking about this, I then realized, this is a lot to manage. And right now we're trying to pare down as much as possible. So that's a no currently. But it's the idea of, now you have this concept of, like, what other kind of toys can you come up with? If I were going to give an example of toys in my current game that I'm kind of looking at. So another example of a toy would be the resolution system that I was originally sort of planning on using, which was the pressure die. To me, that is a resolution mechanic plus a toy, right? What I mean by that is that I'm now just currently using a D20 resolution system. And to me, that's just a straight statistical generator where it's like, all right, I'm just trying to get above 65%. I'm just trying to get above 35%. You roll the die. But the idea of the pressure system to me, because you're having to pick up the two die and you're comparing the two, it didn't feel just like math. It felt like a little bit of a game there, like a little bit of it felt different. It felt like toys, right? Because you're going and grabbing the die off of the pressure die off of the zone. And so to me, it felt different. There was a little bit more of a visceral sort of like component to that. So yes, to me, that felt more like a toy. So those are toys. And now let's go over to flow state. Flow state's a weird one, right? I don't know how much flow state I actually want to achieve in a TTRPG, but it's a part of the game design experience, so I want to highlight it, right? So what is flow state? Flow state, there's a whole book called Flow, and there's lots of people that talk about flow state in the productivity world, because in essence, flow state is the feeling you get of, it's not happiness or exhilaration, but it's not sadness. It's just this pure contentment. It's this mind frame you get in when you're doing work and you're just in it, right? And time almost ceases to exist, and it's called flow, right? So what are some of the things that help you start getting into flow state? Well, knowing what the next step is, knowing what next to do gets you more into flow because you're never having to pause and get out of that mental state. Knowing how to do it, meaning it's intuitive, puts you in flow state. Free from distraction puts you in flow state. Clear and immediate feedback. You're getting immediate feedback, so once again, you know what to do next. It's this intuition, right? High perceived challenge with high perceived skill puts you into flow state. And then pleasant surprises. So all of these things, we've kind of heard some of these things already, that these all promote being in flow state, right? And the outcome of being in flow state is this sort of playful exploration, merging of action and awareness, sense of personal control, loss of reflective self-consciousness. Activity becomes intrinsically motivating, right? So this is flow state. This is what you're trying to achieve. A lot of video games do a great job of this. Those are the video games where it's like, I remember playing EverQuest way back in the day, and I remember being, and this is, hey, we've all probably been there, where I was playing the game, and in that game you had to have food and water in your bags, or otherwise what would happen is the bottom left prompt would tell you you're hungry because you're running out of food. And I remember playing that game one day and it said you're hungry, and I was like, you know what, I actually am, because I've been playing so damn long that I didn't realize that I myself needed a little snack, right? That was a great example of a game really keying me into flow. Anyways, so here's that concept of, once again, extrinsic rewards versus intrinsic. Extrinsic rewards being actual loot, celebrating with other players. That's wonderful. Intrinsic rewards, feeling like you made great decisions or roleplay choices, progress on your own designs, ideas, and plots. That might be an example of intrinsic rewards. And so what are some of the stuff I got from this? Well, all rules should be on your character sheet, because to me, that's that idea of I know what's next, right? If I'm trying to chime in or cue into that idea of it's intuitive and I know my next action, then that means I shouldn't have to stop and look things up. Looking up a rule, looking up a spell is probably the ultimate killer of flow state, to be honest. So this was interesting to me, is that does the idea of the Savage World Combat Guide, which we talked about in a couple of videos back, which is in essence a massive flow chart of actions that can be had, right? Where it's like on the side, it's like, are you, can you hit the target? Yes or no? And it's like, well, do they have high, defense, or do they have high, whatever? It's been a while since I played it. Yes, this thing is wonderful because it gives you a great idea of what's my next action should be, right? And knowing what should come next. So that's wonderful. But is a flow chart like that at the expense of creative exploration? Meaning it's almost a solved puzzle, right? How much creative exploration is there in there? So where is the fine line between giving your players an idea of they should understand what the next step is and knowing what they can do, versus then taking away their creative exploration, right? So that becomes tricky. And I think that's in line. This puzzle here is one for me in terms of design that I have to be conscious of and be wary of. No phones at the table. Come on. I mean, that's a given. And because that's a huge distraction. But it's harder on VTTs. I know that on VTTs, people usually have web browsers open. Sometimes they're using it to look up game design or game rules. But it's just, when a web browser is open, that's a recipe for disaster. Monsters and attacks should have immediate feedback with no distraction to make actions clear for the players. This was interesting to me. There's a lot coming out here in the last video. We talked about controls and emotions so to me, when I finally get done with character design, the monster design to me is going to be so fun, because I think that you're going to have to tap into a lot of interesting things on, like, how does monster design provide feedback for players? How does monster design provide fun surprises? There's a lot of interesting things there, I think, to play around with. And they need to build in immediate feedback that is interesting and adds to the puzzle or feels like a reward throughout the play loop, right? So this constant feedback for every action. So this is why I think something like swinging and missing is so painful for players. And also why, like, the fail with, succeed with consequence and fail with whatever it is, can be so beneficial for players. It's hard on a DM to be able to come up with those other extra concepts. But the reason people love it is because there's feedback. There's something happening, right? You're getting some sort of feedback loop involved. So personally, I think that something like, when you think about the games that have hero points or dice where you get a reward for failing, right? Like you miss, but now you've got this +1 you can use next time, or this extra dice you can roll the next time. I think that's wonderful catch-up mechanic, But it would be interesting, instead of just giving the person a flat dice, you give them some sort of feedback where it's, you now know this about the monster. The next time you attack the monster, try this, or, whatever. It's in essence the exact same thing. You're just giving the plus bonus, but you're doing it in a different way that feels thematic and maybe feels more rewarding, as if they found something out, as opposed to a crutch or like a consolation prize for sucking, which is kind of what it feels like potentially for people when they miss and they get a die, right? Anyways, so that concludes our TTRPG equation. TTRPG equals shared storytelling plus games plus toys, 6 videos of a lot of pontification on game design. And so with that, please leave a comment. Please hit the bell, hit the subscribe button, and hit the like buttons. Leave me some comments. I'd love to know what you guys would like to, where you'd like to go with some of these videos. I'm going to be going into my next video on character sheets. See you guys.